continue with economics A level, still the macroeconomy. Today we're going to talk about the characteristics of emerging, developed, and developing economies. So we're going to start with developed economies. Why do we call them developed economies? We call them developed economies because they have high GDP and they are mostly involved in the service sector of an economy. So I'm going to read further and explain. The characteristics of developed, developing, and emerging economies. For developed economies, these nations possess high economic stability, strong infrastructure, and high standards of living. So we call them developed economies because they mostly have a better improved infrastructure. They are stable when it comes to economic situation. They are stable, and their employment is mostly in the service sector. So, what are those features we can see in a developed economy? Number one, high income. For high income, it's something about the GDP per capita and the GNI per capita. They have a high GDP per capita or GNI per capita. Industry structure. They have their largest employment in the tertiary sector. So, they employ mostly in the tertiary sector, which is the service sector, or probably high manufacturing technology sector. That's where the industry is when it comes to developed economies. The quality of life. We talk about the quality of life. We're simply talking about the kind of consumption the population in a developed economy do have. They have a high life expectancy. They have high life expectancy. They have low infant mortality rate and high levels of education. So they have a high level of literacy rates when it comes to developed economy because they have access to education, they have access to better healthcare facility, and they have, because of this, they have high life expectancy, they have quality of life. The third one, the growth rate. They often have a slow but stable economic growth rate. Yeah, why do they have a slow growth rate? They mostly have slow growth rate because growth rate is simply about output, and developed economies, they are in industrialization. They are not in the manufacturing sector because they don't really have raw materials. As a result of that, they rely on raw materials from developing countries. So that makes economic growth to be a bit slow, but it is stable because they have the service sector and high-tech manufacturing, which is important for the developing economies. So the developing economies rely on them, and that makes their own economy to be more stable. Now go to developing economies. For developing economies, we're simply talking about economies that are characterized by low economic development, low income, and high rates of poverty. So they are developing economies because these kind of economies, they have low income, low level of income. They have their dependency on the agricultural sector or primary sector, and they have high rate of poverty. That's why we call them developing countries. But before I go into the examples of countries that are developed, let me really talk about them. We have the USA, we have Japan, we have Germany, we have UK, and the rest, Belgium, Sweden. These are developed economies. For developing economies, what are their features? One, low income. Low per capita income with significant poverty. So in developing economies, there's high rate of poverty, probably absolute poverty in developing economies, and because they have low income per head. And this is simply because of their reliance in the agricultural sector. Industry structure. What kind of sector do they rely upon? Heavily dependent on agriculture. They depend on agriculture, subsistence farming, and extraction of raw materials. So for developing economies, they are reliant on agriculture. What is agriculture? The planting of crops, rearing of animals for the benefit of man. So this is what they mostly do in the developing economies. And they also rely on the extraction of raw materials. And the extraction of raw materials does not mean a high level of income compared to the conversion of raw materials or the selling of the final product. That's where the real income comes in. But developing economies, they lack the financial capability and technology, the technical know-how, to move into the industrialization. The demographics demographics, infrastructure, sorry, poorly developed, they are poorly developed, they lack modern and reliable infrastructure. So in developing economies, there's lack of road network, there's lack of water supply, there's lack of electricity, there's lack of quality and better education. So this makes them, vulnerable. Demographics. How is the population in developing economies? High and fast population growth and low life expectancy. They have a high rate of population growth and they have low life expectancy. And why do they have low life expectancy? They have low life expectancy because of their lack of access to healthcare and education. The examples of countries that can be considered as developing economies are Chad, Niger Republic, Bangladesh, and so on. Then we have the emerging economies. And for emerging economies, we call them rapid developing economies. So they are transitioning from developing to developed economies. So they are moving from developing nations, from the reliance of raw materials to the conversion of raw materials and probably to the service sector. So they are moving from the primary sector, they are transiting from the primary sector to the secondary sector and mostly probably to the tertiary sector. So they have rapid industrialization and high growth rates. They have high growth rates because they have more raw materials that can be converted into finished products. What are their features? Fast growth. They experience rapid industrialization and high GDP growth rates. Now we're talking about industrialization. Industrialization is a situation whereby a non-industrialized economy becomes industrialized. An economy that relies mostly on probably agriculture, now trying to agriculture or extraction of raw materials starts transiting into manufacturing sector or the secondary sector. That is what industrialization is. So industrialization simply means the transition from the primary sector to the secondary sector. Transition, moving away from reliance on agriculture and towards manufacturing and services. So emerging economies or rapid developing economies, they transit, they are moving from the reliance on the primary sector to the secondary and the tertiary sector. Their market growth, they have rapid consumer market and trade openings. So which simply means emerging economies like China, like India, like South Africa, the BRICS country, they do more of exportation of finished goods, and that is what is meant by rapid expanded consumer market and trade openings. And trade, when you talk about trade, it simply means the buying and selling of goods and services. And for international trade, it means exportation and importation. Then investment opportunity in emerging economies. There's potential returns. It has potential return, also attracting high foreign direct investment. The potential opportunity in emerging economies is that they have high returns because they do more of trading, and as a result of that, it increases their potential on high returns, and it is the place of attraction for foreign direct investment like multinationals. Examples of countries that are in emerging or rapid developing economies are China, India, Brazil, South Africa, the BRICS country. So these are the characteristics of developed economies, emerging economies, and developing economies. Thank you.